Hey, listen closely to these songs.
In AA with an AK melee, finna set it like a play date, better vacate, retreat like a vacate mayday. 혼자 다 해먹은 마치 난 북한 대통령 같아. 마약 수사팀은 난년도 약한 새끼들 잡아 전부 다 swish. 俺のこと OK ししてた人たちにもはや興味がねえしあまり気にしないだから平気だけどうざいのはうざい Bitch, ça fait très très longtemps que j'y pense à comment se mettre bien, moi j'ai pas ton élan. N'écoute jamais les on-dit, ceux qui jactent n'ont pas vu la vie au travers de ton monde. J'ai beau parler dans leur langue, mais faut croire qu'ils
Did you
n'entendent
notice
que le
anything
langage
different
de la
about them?
violence.
Firstly, they were all rap songs in different languages, specifically English, Korean, Japanese, and French. But what if I told you that each of these songs sound different not because of musical choice, but because of the underlying linguistic rhythm of their speaker's language? Right, that's probably a little wordy, so let me break that down. In linguistics, prosody is the study of intonation, stress, and rhythm in a language. It's the reason why a native English speaker would probably read the sentence as, "The local train left the station more than 5 minutes ago," and not, "The local train left the station more than 5 minutes ago." And in music, rhythm is usually defined by the distance between notes and or silences. Basically, the difference between this and this. Okay, so what's the big deal? I mean, it theoretically makes sense that timing in speech might have an influence on timing in musical lyrics, right? Well, for a long time, it was believed that music and speech occupied two different parts of the brain, and thus, linguists and musicologists didn't think that language and music really had that strong of a relationship. A study that would challenge that notion was a study done by the Institute of Behavioral Sciences at the University of Helsinki by Maija Hausen, Rifta, Torpa, Viljami Arsalmela, Marty Vainio, and Teppo Sargamo. To put it simply, they conducted 4 tests for music perception, speech prosody perception, visuospatial perception, and pitch perception to analyze if musical ability is related to linguistic ability and likewise. For the purpose of this video, only the music perception and speech prosody tests are really relevant, but they found a statistically significant correlation between word stress perception and musical perception total score, but only relating to musical rhythm and not pitch. Here are their graphs showing the relationship. Basically, this might imply that there is a relationship between speech prosody and musical rhythm. As you can see on the bottom left graph, a better performance on word stress tests seems to be related to a better performance on identifying musical rhythm. But sure, say there definitely is a relationship between prosody and musical rhythm. What specifically is that relationship? To get into that a little bit, I'd like to introduce this linguistic theory about different timing of languages. The isochrony hypothesis, introduced by linguist Kenneth Lee Pike, is the idea that a given language can rhythmically fall under one of 3 categories. First, there are syllable-timed languages, where each syllable takes around the same amount of time. Some examples are French, Turkish, Mandarin, and Korean. If English was a syllable-timed language, this sentence would be said as "a bag of fries." Then there are stress-timed languages, where the distance between each stressed syllable is relatively the same. Some examples are Thai, German, Russian, and of course, English. That's why as a native English speaker, I pronounce the following as "a bag of fries." And finally, there are mora-timed languages, where instead of syllables, the timing between each mora is the same. The definition of a mora may vary between languages, but usually a short vowel with or without consonants before it represents 1 mora, while long vowels or diphthongs may represent 2 morai. Sometimes consonants preceding the vowel may also represent a mora, like the Japanese word for Japan, where the final n is a mora. If English was a mora-timed language, then this sentence might sound like "a bag of fries." Now that we have that information, let's look back at the songs I showed earlier. This might begin to help explain why Eminem sounds different from Yame. Remember, Eminem is rapping in a stress-time language, whereas Yame is rapping in a syllable-time language. And that also may be why, at least to me, freestyle sounds the most like Bekon, even though the general feel of the songs is completely different. Alright, but simply saying that one rhythm might be different from another may be well and good, but what about the hard data? Well, enter the NPVI, otherwise known as the Normalized Pairwise Variability Index. The NPVI was originally used to measure the rhythm of languages using this equation right here, which Joseph Daniel says quantifies the average amount of durational contrast between successive events in a sequence. But for now, all you really need to understand is that a phrase in a language with a higher NPVI has a faster alteration from short sounds to long sounds. It tends to go that a sentence in a stress-timed language usually has a higher NPVI than a sentence in a syllable-timed or mora-timed language. What Danielle and Anirudh Patel did, however, was use the NPVI on classical music. In this way, they could find whether a musical score is influenced by the composer's language or not by comparing languages with higher NPVI values like English to languages with lower NPVI values like French, and then seeing if there was still a difference. Here's an example comparing a British composer to a French composer. First, here's a snippet from British composer Sir Edward Elgar's Symphony No. 1 in A flat. And now here's a snippet of French composer Claude Debussy's Quartet in G minor for strings. That Debussy theme has an MPVI of 42.2, while the Elgar theme has an MPVI of 57.1. Danielle and Patel continued comparing a bunch of different French composers to a bunch of different English composers, and here's what they found. You'll see that on average, the English music had a significantly higher NPVI value than the French music. And now compare that to this graph, comparing English and French speech. You'll notice the same trend is happening. What this might begin to show is how prosody and musical rhythm may be more linked than we originally thought. So are songs really impacted by the underlying linguistic rhythm of their speakers' languages? Maybe. Even though there's a lot of data and whatnot, there's still some important things to note. Like, for example, music is not only influenced by its people's culture, but also by popular culture too. It's also safe to say that while MPVI comparisons might make sense on paper, there are other things to consider, like a composer's actual nationality and their projected nationality. What this all does is bring a closer understanding of music and language. It suggests that the rhythmic fingerprint of a language does leave an imprint on musical compositions. And as we continue to unravel the mysteries of this relationship, one thing is clear. Music and language are not just neighbors in our minds, they're intertwined companions, each influencing the other in a beautiful, rhythmic dance. Thank you.